Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that some of you are dialing in from different parts of the world, so the time zones are a little tricky. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join. So thank you for being here. The iGB webinar update. I'm Stuart Hunter, the Managing Director of the Gaming Division at Clarion. I head up all of our live events portfolio, including ICE and iGB Affiliate London. I'm joined by Richard Logan, who's our head of operations. He's the guy tasked with the momentous challenge of delivering all our live shows, especially through this tricky period that we're all going through. Morning, Richard.
Morning, Stu.
Quick note to say that we are recording the webinar. So for those that can't join, we will be able to distribute that a little bit later today. Obviously, if you need to jump off at any point, then we will send through the full recording because there'll be lots of finer details towards the end, really. So I'll kick off really, and just to say that Richard and I have been planning. I say Richard and I. Richard's done most of the work in terms of planning for this webinar over the last couple of weeks. Really, we designed this webinar to kind of really front up what are the questions that we were getting into our teams around the current conditions, the travel requirements into the UK, the health and safety protocols for XL, etc. So there's a lot of questions that have been floating around, and we just decided actually this webinar would be a good opportunity for us all to cover those off in a live environment, take some questions, and hopefully kind of give everyone the confidence they need in terms of the preparations for the show. So that was the original plan. Saying that, over the last 48 hours, we have seen a change to that plan in many respects. Those that are obviously based in the UK and Europe, there has been a deterioration of the conditions in the UK. We have had some heightened concern, I guess, from our exhibitor base. And we are in a position now where we've had to relook at the viability of ICE and iGB Affiliate London in February. Obviously, the confidence is something that we've all been running really quite at a really good pace, I would say, up until probably the last 2 weeks. Both of the shows have been in a very strong position, but obviously the last week or so, and specifically the last few days, we have received some heightened concern. And obviously confidence is something that we need for the shows. It's something that we need to ensure that our international attendants feel comfortable and confident to travel. And I think that by looking at the prognosis really for the next few weeks into the UK and Europe, the conditions will probably deteriorate further before they get better. So the conditions aren't conducive. So really, we've had to look at that, and I do think, regrettably, that the position we are in today looks most likely that we will have to look to postpone the February shows, which is a difficult decision. It's a regrettable decision, but I do think it is the right one in the current circumstances. I think, as I said, prior to the last 2 weeks, both of the shows have been in great shape, really. Both of the shows have been very close to reaching capacity from an exhibitor perspective. I think the lineup of exhibitors is probably the best yet for both shows. Registration for both shows are way in excess of where they were this time for the last shows that we ran in 2020. But like I said, we are in uncertain times and very difficult period over the last few weeks. So we are looking to kind of make that call. So I guess what I'm asking our exhibitor base to do is to push pause. There has been a lot of concern around pushing those final buttons, those operational buttons, in terms of agreeing the logistics processes and getting the operations geared up for the February shows. So I wanted to give that clarity. I wanted to give that confidence, I guess, that is likely our decision. So I'm asking everyone to pause for a moment. So don't push those buttons in terms of moving forward for February. Clear that that we have some challenges ahead of us. So rather than let the next week or two play out to see if conditions improve, I do think it's the right call for us to make that today. So I guess the obvious question is where do we go next? Obviously, we have always worked with a plan B scenario. It's obviously the likely thing we've all had to do in the live events world during COVID, which continues to be a challenge. So we are working on that plan B as we speak. We have some ideas of when that might be later in the springtime in 22, but we still have some work to do to iron those out. As you can imagine, moving a show the size and scale of ICE and iGB affiliate London, and the fact that it takes over the entirety of Excel is no mean feat. Excel is a world-class leading exhibition venue, so having availability is always a challenge. But we do have some options. We just need to work through it a little bit closer. Obviously, we've been speaking a lot to our exhibitor base over the last couple of days, sort of gauging opinions and listening to their concerns. So we will work through that. And we plan to get some further confirmation out to the industry by next Wednesday, if we can. So for me, really, the instructions, I hope, are pretty clear. Postponement, very, very likely. So please push pause on your planning. Obviously, what we will do is come back as soon as we can with some alternatives. We will, as always, work with every single component part of our stakeholder group for ICE to make sure that this postponement and this alternatives work for you. If it doesn't, then clearly we'll work with you to find the right solution. But I do hope that we're in a position where we can pick up all the great energy and effort and progress that we've all made across ICE and migrate it to a slightly safer period so we can rebuild that confidence again. I certainly think with cases rising in the UK, I certainly have no medical expertise, but it looks as if cases will continue to arise, and what we're hearing is there might be some sharp decline. So we may well be in a position by February that the exhibitions can continue to run. Well, they are still running, but really we can't hedge our bets. There's too many uncertain weeks, really, and there's too much at stake. We know the cost that our exhibitors put on the line, really, to be at ICE, certainly our international clients. So now's the right time to make that call. So for me, I want to thank everybody that has been part of putting ICE and iGB 2022 into place. As I said before, on paper, they look to be fabulous versions of the live events, and we are really excited to get the international gaming communities back together. I think we've got the best roster of exhibitor lineup we've ever had. I think certainly the investment that we've put into the show this year should hopefully show in droves, and I think we're in a strong position. Just unfortunately, we are going to have to wait a little bit of time for us to get over that line. So outside of that, I still think there's lots of relevant questions which I'm going to loop Richard into now. I think most of the health and safety and the COVID protocols that we have had in place for the February shows will obviously remain in place more than likely throughout this year. So I'll head over to Richard in a second, where we can kind of cover off some of those, because they are some frequently asked questions and they will still be relevant post-February. If there are any questions around the postponement that anyone wants to ask on this webinar, please do put them in the chat box. Rich and I will try and answer as many of those as we can over the next 30 minutes or so. If there's anything that we can't answer or we don't have time to answer, we will come back to you personally. We'll publish those answers as we go through. Obviously, from an exhibitor perspective, you have direct contact with your account manager. Everyone has my contact details, and Alex Pratt, the group managing director, his contact details. He's currently flying back from Las Vegas at the moment, so couldn't join. But we're around to obviously address any of those concerns individually. But if there's any questions today, we'll pick those up in a second. But Rich, let me flip to you just in terms of an overview of the current kind of headlines from a COVID perspective in terms of ICE.
Before we get to those two, we have had a few questions come in on the chat, and I think it's worth you reiterating, because a few people have asked, is this a postponement or is this a cancellation? And just could we also reiterate when the decision will be about the new dates, because quite a few people have asked that in the chat. So just, I know you've covered it, but perhaps worth reiterating.
Yeah, perfect. Let me reiterate in case I was waffling on a little bit before. This is a postponement. Looking at February, we just don't believe it's viable. Speaking to our stakeholder group, there is serious concerns, and certainly for the next few weeks, we do feel that we're in a position where we need confidence to be increased. It probably unlikely is that's going to happen with the current conditions in UK and Europe. So this is a postponement, but where we are at now is exploring and reviewing what the alternatives look like. We will need some more time to do that. We will need some more time to share that with our exhibitor base to kind of get a consensus. And we hope to have confirmation of what that plan B looks like this side of Christmas, ideally by Wednesday of next week. So we will report back to the exhibitor base on what that looks like. But as I said before, I wanted to make sure that we got the news out today, because I'm very conscious our exhibitor base are close to pushing buttons of operational expenditure. And I know some may well already have done certain elements, but without anything getting further, I wanted to give that clarity today. It's really important that we pause. We don't spend any more money at this moment in time and cease that planning. Obviously, there's lots of repercussions that we will be working with as a team in terms of hotel bookings, etc. We are on hand to support all of that. So we'll work through that process over the next week or so. But from ICE perspective, it is a pause.
Cool. And Stu, just another question. By Wednesday next week, are we going to be able to provide the audience, the exhibitor base, guidance on what the new date lines will be?
I hope so, Richard. We have two possible date lines that we're looking at the moment. They are sitting in that sort of late spring period. But like I said, I don't want to issue dates just yet until we are in a position where we have run through some diligence on them. As I said before, as you know, more than anyone, delivering ICE the size and scale, if we don't have every available part of Excel, it's not going to work. So we're just some fine tuning that we need to do as a wider management team and with all our stakeholder group. But I hope to be in a position by next Wednesday to showcase those dates. If we're not by then, we will obviously update the exhibitor base and then continue to work on that with hopefully further clarity the first week of January. But as I said, everyone should now understand that the February is going to be postponed, but we will take a bit of time to come back with that alternative.
And Stu, we've also got a question in the chat here from someone asking, are we going to be providing an official statement in writing that they can share sort of within their organizations? Is that something we'll be doing?
Yeah, totally. So during this webinar or just after it, we'll send an official notification to our exhibitor base, and they will have written confirmation, a summary, I guess, of the contents of this webinar. We'll also put a link to this webinar on that dedicated email. And then obviously we'll be making a formal statement out to the wider industry later today that can be used. Obviously, our exhibitor base is always the first to hear of these changes, because they are a stakeholder group which takes priority. So hence this webinar really, and making sure that we are giving everyone advance notice, and that will follow up with a message direct before we go out to the wider industry.
Excellent. And we've had a question here, Stu, about what this means for outstanding invoices. Is that a conversation they should pick up as an exhibitor with their account manager?
Yeah, totally. I think as we've always operated with ICE, we try, while we have our engagement, which is client by client. All of our clients have very different wants and needs and requests in many respects. So we try to work with everyone on a case by case. Obviously, if the show moves, then more than likely we could look at changing invoicing. For some that will be preferred, for others less preferred really. So for sure we'll work on a case by case, and we'll always do what we can and what's the best for the customer, if we can do that, for sure.
Cool. And then we've also had a question in here about whether ICE will remain a completely physical event in future, or would we move to a sort of hybrid virtual model?
Okay, that's interesting, and I could probably talk for hours on that subject, and we do plan to do a separate release about that at some point. And as you know as much as I do the answer to that, Richard, ICE for us is very much and will be created for to maximise the live in-person experience. We've certainly seen that with the return of iGB Live in Amsterdam, that there is little that can improve on that in-person experience. But obviously, we also recognise that we are running through more challenging times for travel. So we have invested in an entirely new hybrid proposition for ICE, which we are putting the finer points on now. So with our ICE 365 brand, we are investing into a new proposition, which I think the industry will enjoy and get benefit from. So to answer that, yes, but without giving too much detail, there'll be a release about that coming out in the next few weeks. But yeah, for sure, those that are unable to travel to ICE will obviously have an element of an ICE experience. For sure, it will not be a full ICE experience, because that is to be gained in person. But for sure, it will give you much more of an involvement in ICE if you aren't able to travel.
Cool. Okay, I don't see any more questions that have come through that aren't sort of duplicates of the ones before, Stu. So perhaps we can move on then to sort of operational element of this webinar, which was me covering off what we plan to have in place at the show. As Stu's mentioned, this is what we were planning to put in place for February, and really that will continue to be our plan for any future iterations of ICE as well, to make sure that we're doing the right thing and making sure that it's safe and comfortable for everyone against COVID, of course. So I know first and foremost, a lot of people will be wondering or wanting clarity on what they need to do to travel to the UK. I think there's been a lot of confusion around this, and what I've done is go through the official UK government guidance and pulled out the information I think is really the most important to understand. So I'll cover that off now, and as questions come through on the chat, I'll try and cover those off at the end. So to travel to the UK, the first thing you need to understand is whether you're classed as vaccinated, fully vaccinated, or unvaccinated, and because what you have to do upon arrival depends on that. So I'll start with fully vaccinated travelers. So if you are classed as fully vaccinated, and you can check that relatively easily on the UK government website, the link to do that is on our website, and it also has the link there of what actually is required to sort of demonstrate that you're fully vaccinated. But to arrive in the UK and be classed as fully vaccinated, there's going to be 3 things that you need to do. So of course there is, as you see a lot of places, you have to take a pre-flight COVID test 2 days before you travel to England. And then you're going to have to complete a passenger locator form, which is going to need to contain details of your arrival test. So that's the test you take when you arrive in the UK. And I think around this, there's been some particular confusion because it's called a 2-day PCR test, and people are perhaps thinking that they have to quarantine for 2 days and then take the test, and that's actually not the case. It is, you have to take the test within 2 days of arriving in England. So our absolute recommendation is to take that test as soon as you arrive at the UK. The UK airports have adapted very quickly. There are testing facilities available at the airports. I've seen a question in the chat earlier on whether they're walk-in or drive-through. Actually, at most of London's airports, there are both available. There's a couple different testing providers there, so they should really cater for most needs. And the reason our recommendation is going to be to do that as soon as possible is because as soon as you've taken your test, the result is then being processed and you're getting it back as quickly as possible. And you only need to quarantine until you've had your result back, confirming that you don't have COVID. So the quicker you can get your test done, the quicker you're going to get your result back, the less time you're going to spend in quarantine. So absolutely our recommendation to take that test as soon as you can upon arrival at an airport, if that suits your personal circumstances. And the UK airports have actually adapted very quickly. So there are already testing facilities, like I said, in place at all the big London airports. Gatwick and Heathrow promise a result by 10 PM the next day at the moment. And then at the likes of London City Airport, there's actually a premium service you can opt for, which promises your result back by 6 PM the same day if you test before 6 PM, and then if you test after 6 PM, it's by 6 AM the next day. And what we're seeing is that premium service being rolled out at all the UK airports. So by the time we run ICE, I'm fully expecting that to be widely rolled out so that people can take advantage of those.
And
so,
Richard, with that, because we were hearing a lot about that as a major concern in the preceding weeks, really, in terms of the assumption that people would have to sit in quarantine for 3 days before they release, and you just clarified that that's not the case. But if you think about the best case scenario, someone flying in from Heathrow, taking a test whilst they're there, and then obviously they are able then to make their transit to their hotel, for an example, whilst they're waiting for that result. That's correct, isn't it?
Correct, yeah, absolutely. So you are able to travel directly to your accommodation. You are actually allowed to use public transport, just has to be direct to your accommodation, so you can kind of start your quarantine. There isn't a need to stay in a mandatory quarantine hotel anymore. It's you selecting your own accommodation. You just need to travel directly there and then await your results. So like I say, potentially less than 24 hours. And that's at the moment. And as we get closer to the show, I fully expect the sort of turnaround time on those to reduce. So that's fully vaccinated travellers. For those who don't qualify as fully vaccinated, things are slightly different. So you still have to do your pre-flight PCR COVID test, and then you're going to have to fill in that same passenger locator form. But you're also going to have to take, as well as the arrival 2-day PCR test, you have to take an arrival test on the 8th day as well. So both of those are the same tests. I mean, you still have to test the 2-day one within 2 days of arrival, and then the 8-day test is after your 8th day. I think what our key recommendation there would be to people is there is a third option, and that is the test to release scheme, where you pay for a third PCR test on the 5th day, and provided your result from that is negative, you can then release yourself from quarantine. So the quarantine is undoubtedly slightly longer for those who aren't fully vaccinated, but again, quite manageable really. And I think people will be wondering, where can they get these tests? I've already seen quite a few questions pop up in the chat about where are the tests available. So I've already covered off that they're available at all London's major airports. I'll reiterate that. They have facilities at all of them. You're able to make appointments online. And then what we are going to do in addition to that is, working with one of the UK's leading testing providers, we're going to put our own testing facility in place. And what we want to do is work in partnership with them to not only provide a testing facility on site at the show at Excel, where people can travel directly after arriving, have their test, their laboratory that the tests have to go to be processed is in the Greater London area, which means that the turnaround times expected there are 4 to 6 hours, which is very speedy. And then we also want to make sure that they offer some additional services. So I know that there are an incredible amount of large groups that travel to ICE, particularly in the specs community, and this testing provider offers a concierge service for groups larger than 6, where they will come to your hotel, test your group of staff en masse, and then take those tests away to be processed in a laboratory, and get those results back as soon as possible. So again, what we're trying to do is make this as convenient as possible for our audience. This is a part of everyday life now. Travel is slightly different, that's out of our hands, but what's within our control is trying to put infrastructure in place to make this as convenient as possible for our audience. So like I say, that concierge service, that testing provider, we're also going to speak to them about whether we can have sort of bespoke areas within some of the larger UK airports. We'll have to do a little bit of work with our audience, trying to understand when it is and where they will arrive. So don't be surprised if we kind of send out a survey to the specs community, and if you can contribute to that, we'd be grateful, because that just allows us to put the right infrastructure in place to make sure you're catered for, really. Let me scroll down here on my notes. I think it's also important to point out as well, I know that some people may be staying in other areas of London due to their personal circumstances. There are testing facilities throughout London. If you need anybody's help finding one of those, please just write into me and my team at the hello@Clarion Gaming email address, and we'll be happy to find you a testing facility that works for you. There are other ones close to Excel, for example, over the O2 Arena. They offer all the tests necessary, including that premium one that I mentioned earlier on, where you can get your result turned around really quite quickly. As well as the arrival tests, I know that some people will be wanting other types of tests. So number one, I suppose under the same umbrella of travel, I know that people will need a pre-flight PCR test. Again, those are widely available at London's airports, with results being returned within 3 hours. And it's also going to be one of the tests we offer at our on-site testing facility. So people are able to make an appointment to go there within a time frame to have that process, so they don't have to take time out of their busy show schedule to go and go through the inconvenience of that. So that's something we're putting in place as well. The third type of test is that recently the government regulations in the UK changed, which means that in order to enter an event, you either have to demonstrate that you're fully vaccinated or that you've had a recent rapid lateral flow test. So that's another type of test, again, just as a convenience to our audience that we're going to be offering at that on-site testing facility. So you won't have to go anywhere specific to go and get it. We can just provide that for you, and that will be, again, a service you'll be able to book via this website of our testing provider, and you can go there and have your sort of entry test to ensure that we're keeping the show as safe as possible. Going to keep going now and speak about that's sort of like the travel portion of things. I also wanted to just take the opportunity to give people an idea about what we are doing in general outside of that emission control that I just spoke about to ensure that we're keeping the show as safe as possible. So in the UK, there was a document drafted called the All Secure Standard. This was something drafted in collaboration by a number of the UK's leading event organisers, one of which of course is Clarion. And what this was us mapping out how we can run a show in a COVID safe manner. That guidance was written and then refined over the course of the last year and has been ratified by the UK government and has now been adopted widely. So we will be absolutely following the All Secure Standard. I'll briefly cover off the 4 main pillars of that. If anybody wanted more detail on this or specifically what we're doing, then again, just happy for you to write into that hello@clariongaming.com email address, and I'll field those questions personally. So we've already mentioned entry control, so a COVID status check, ensuring that people are fully vaccinated or they've had a recent negative test. So just in terms of what people would be able to use to demonstrate that, I'll cover off briefly. In the UK, if you're a resident of the UK, you'll be familiar with the NHS COVID Pass, where it's on your phone and you're able to demonstrate your vaccination record via that. We will accept any international equivalent of that. We will also accept any vaccination record, an international vaccination record accepted at the UK border as well. And again, what we'll do is we'll publish the link to that on our website so people can check whether their vaccination record will be accepted. And then in terms of if you're going the testing route, then it's either that negative test of a lateral flow, or if your PCR result is still valid, that can also be used. We'll just be asking to see a text or an email confirmation of that. I think that's the first and foremost, making sure that everybody coming into the show doesn't have COVID or has been vaccinated against it really does put a really top line protection in place. But on top of that, we're going to go further than that. We fully risk assess every element of the show, looking at COVID transmission as a risk, and then we put in place measures to make sure we're protecting against that. So some examples of that will just be additional cleaning, of course, additional cleaning, hygiene and ventilation make up part of that All Secure Standard, making sure that there is sufficient fresh air being cycled through the building, an increased cleaning regime, focusing on regular touch points, and making sure there are adequate hygiene measures throughout the show. That'll be things like hand sanitizer and such. We will have that stationed at all the major entry points at our features, and of course we'll be encouraging the exhibitor base to make sure they adopt those as well. I think one of the biggest and most important parts of the measures we put in place is communicating to our audience and to our staff and to our exhibitor base what we're putting in place, how they can help to keep the show safe. So that's everything from us writing full guidance for exhibitors, which has already been done. It's included in our exhibitor manual. And then down to the smaller things, just indicating and reminding people to follow the basics, to regularly wash their hands, and if they do need to sneeze, to make sure those are covered and disposed of in a tissue or something like that.
Rich, there's a couple of questions that I've seen come through just in terms of
Sure.
some of the specific testing and some specific testing around Omicron. Really, I think you've kind of covered everything off, but I don't know if you if there's a couple of slightly more detailed points that we need to cover on that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of questions come through as well of confirming again. I think I've covered it there about whether a lateral flow test will be accepted as a travel test. And the answer to that is no. It does have to be a PCR test at the moment. And let me see what else we've had.
The lateral flow tests are accepted for entry into Excel, correct? Though, aren't they?
That is correct.
Yeah, you either show your proof of vaccination or recovery or lateral flow test. So that's an important point to mention, actually, because I was at Excel yesterday. So despite obviously the challenging conditions, we are still running large-scale events very successfully here in the UK. So we have our International Horse Show that's running at Excel with over 50,000 attendees. And unlike ICE before, where the boulevard and entry into the boulevard is a kind of a free space, now obviously to access the Excel campus, you need to go through and show one of those three elements. So it's a very, having experienced it a few times now, but most noticeably yesterday, it's a very smooth, easy, efficient process. You're off the DLR. You're in, you show your pass, and then you're in the venue. So then you know that anybody that you come in contact with in the venue is either double vaccinated, has tested negative on that day, or has recently recovered within that time frame. So it does feel, certainly, well, the perception is and the feedback is that it fills those guests full of confidence, and certainly hasn't affected any of our numbers of shows that we've traded there as of today, which is good to see.
Yeah. And just to cover off some additional questions that have come through, our audience has pointed out quite rightly that I've referred to ICE quite a few times, and I haven't said iGB Affiliate London. That's my bad. Absolutely, when I'm referring to ICE there, I'm also referring to iGB Affiliate London. And we've also had a question through to that effect, Stu, that when you were talking about the postponement, can you just confirm that is iGB Affiliate London is also included in that postponement, the two sit together?
Yeah, they very much do. I guess certainly in our heart and minds they do, and certainly when we engage with our customers that they do. There are huge amounts of mutual benefits for those shows to exist together in that space. So where we look at it, the conditions are still the same for both events. So when I talk about a postponement, we talk about the entirety. Over time we have been and starting to develop a gaming week in London during that February period, which very much includes ICE and iGB Affiliate London. So everything we're saying on this call is entirely inclusive of iGB Affiliate London. So apologies if we've not dropped the reference as often as ICE. I think that's just out of habit on this particular call today, but it's totally all inclusive.
Excellent. And then in a similar vein, Stu, we've had a question through to say that if the date of ICE and iGB Affiliate London move, will that impact iGB Live? Have we had a chance to examine that yet?
Yeah, we have. We've had obviously a lot of questions internally about that as a team, and I hope not is my statement on that. Obviously, we had a very successful iGB Live back in October time. The feedback that we've had from the exhibitor base and from the industry has been outstanding, really. I think it was testament to everybody that was participating in that, from an exhibitor to sponsor, right through to all our contractors and team, that the show was very successful. I think not only being there together for the first time was clearly euphoric, but I think actually the type of business that was done was really noticeable. So and even recently to receive the feedback from the industry that it's in the top 2% of the highest scoring B2B trade shows that Explory, who managed the kind of net promoter score, which is a sign of satisfaction in the UK, it's certainly in the top 2%, which is testament really to all that good work. So Momentum for that show continues to develop. We've got some exciting evolution on that, which is led by Naomi Barton, who heads up the iGB portfolio. So we've got a lot of exciting things that are building towards July in Amsterdam. So obviously, any of the changes that we make for the February shows are also in mind for July. And what I'm hoping is the dates that we can secure for in replacement for February don't upset that balance for July. As I said before, we have a little bit of fine tuning to do. We need to do that over the next few days. But I am hopeful with the options that we've got, they do not put any concern towards July. So July feels very much in the right place at this moment in time. Obviously, like anything, we're in a very fluid world. And as we saw last year, things can change. And as we've seen this week, things can change quite quickly. So we will obviously communicate with everyone if there are any changes. But right at this moment in time today, I don't see any concerns with July, and I really every solution we're trying to make for the February replacement is absolutely with one eye on July to make sure that doesn't get unsettled if we can help it. So I hope that answers the question.
And then speaking about sort of ongoing change, Stu, we've had a question in here saying that in the event that things in the spring don't look any better than they do now, what would then happen to the postponement of iGB?
I think we would have to be totally honest with the industry and say we would only want to run ICE and iGB affiliate London if we were confident that we could deliver on the experience that everyone has come to expect from those shows. So if that starts to look less likely, then there is absolutely no motivation from us, from Clarion, from everyone that's working behind to force the issue to create an event that isn't upstanding to the levels that we all expect. So obviously that's the worst case scenario. I do sit here very confident in thinking that things will improve quite quickly. We certainly have seen, even though case rates in the UK are high, the level of hospitalizations is still very low. So I think what we're battling in most respects is just a crisis of confidence in terms of the portrayal of the situation here, which I totally understand. You know, people do need to feel comfortable and confident to travel. So I am expecting, we are hoping and expecting that will return to some level of normality quite quickly. But obviously, if it doesn't, and we can't secure future dates that the industry likes and wants, and we don't believe we can run an event that is of the caliber that it needs to be, then obviously we won't run an event in 2022. That obviously is our worst case scenario. And chatting to a lot of our stakeholder group, you know, they want ICE to happen as much as we do. So we'll do everything we can to make it happen. But what we won't do is force the issue, like we did last year. Really, we reached a point where it was becoming less obvious that we could deliver a nice experience. So we made that decision not to run it. So that would be our worst case scenario. But I do believe we've got a great opportunity between now and then actually to find an alternative and a great solution. So that's our position on that.
Great, thank you, Stu. We've had a comment in saying that someone's recently flown to the UK whose colleagues have tried to use the PCR premium test that I've referred to there, and they were unable to find availability for it. I think this guidance that was put in place by the UK government was a very short notice, and although airports have done their best to adapt very quickly, I think, yes, there is still work to be done there. But again, over the course of the next few months, I'm sure that the infrastructure will be put in place to accommodate a much larger quantity of people who are opting for that. So it's not something I'm concerned about at the moment. I think absolutely people are motivated to make sure that those premium tests are available, commonplace everywhere. Someone's also asked if those tests are available at the ferry terminal, and I have to admit off the top of my head that's something I don't know, but what I will do is go and look at that and make sure that is published in the guidance on our website. So if you can come back to us in a week or so, then I'll make sure that's there for you, or at least I can give you the links to go and find that information on the UK government's website. Let me see what other questions have come in here. Someone has also asked, if the event is postponed, will the website remain live with all the company information? I think the answer to that is yes, isn't it, Stu? We're not going to take that down for any reason.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think there has been some real momentum. Whilst I'm asking our exhibitor base to pause in terms of their operational planning, there's certainly no pause from us in terms of the internal team. We've got a huge campaign of activity planned, and in many respects, everything that we had planned between now and February will continue, and we will start to look to add to that really for that additional duration. So there may well be a mild slowdown in communications, but only because we can reconfigure and really redesign what the sort of run up to ICE looks like a few months later than it was currently scheduled for. So totally everything that we've got, we will still be pushing on in terms of development on our development of ICE. So things like the websites, all our content streams, etc., all our sort of the wider stories of all the exciting things that are happening in ICE, that will still continue. So we're not going to go quiet.
Cool, thank you. Someone's asked here whether we're expecting a full lockdown in London, Stu. Is that something we're kind of qualified to answer?
Short answer is we're not qualified to answer. I wish we were. I think when you read the media day by day, it can be, you can have a variety of different opinions. I think that the general feeling, or certainly what I'm consuming now, and I'm consuming the same media as probably everyone on the call, really in a varying degrees of form, but it doesn't look likely. But obviously, we can't rule it out. I think there's more things and that will end up changing over the next few weeks. But I'm certainly hearing more optimism about the fact that the Omicron variant, for an example, is much more transmissible, but much less virulent. So hopefully it's something that everyone rides through quite quickly and things settle down really. But as I said at the beginning, there's obviously going to be some rough weeks, and that was never going to be conducive to us kind of gearing the industry up for an international event in February. So that, amongst our exhibitor base having lots of kind of concerns and getting ready to push the button operationally, was what's driven this decision primarily.
Okay, great. We've only got a short amount of time left, Stu, but we've had quite a few people join us late and who've missed the beginning of the webinar, which they've apologized for, but they're just asking if we can kind of reiterate the headlines that they might have missed at the beginning. Is that something you want to go through? Yeah, I can give a quick summary. As I said, we'll distribute a statement to our exhibitor base as soon as we can. Sorry, forgive me, I didn't put my mobile on silent. It's been ringing off the hook clearly. So if you can hear it in the background, apologies for that. So we'll send an email or communication out to our exhibitors very shortly, so everyone will have it in print. We'll also be sharing a recording of this webinar so everyone can catch up. But in summary, in light of the last really probably 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, the conditions in the UK have deteriorated, and obviously the concern has grown. So we're at a period now where, I think, looking at our February shows, ICE and iGB affiliate London, they are looking less viable that they can run in February. I don't think we're in a position where confidence is going to increase. It's going to be a challenge really. So we are looking to postpone those shows, and we are looking at some alternatives, some viable alternatives over the next few days, and hope to communicate that to the industry by the middle of next week. So that's the summary. But obviously, like I said, we'll be sharing the full version of this webinar and be giving that out to the exhibitor base in written format sometimes later this morning. Great, thanks, G. I think I've done my very best to make sure we've covered off all the questions that we've had in. I might have missed one or two. If I have, sincere apologies for that. Again, you're welcome to follow up by writing into our email address, hello@Clarion Gaming, or of course, if you're an exhibitor, you're welcome to speak to your account manager. But yeah, I think we could close this there, Stu, unless there's anything more from you.
No, nothing else. Look, thanks, Richard. It's really good to get your updates on that. I know that will come at some relief to quite a lot of our exhibitor base, because it is quite a difficult thing to kind of translate. And certainly we were hearing from some of our European clients that the perception of getting into the UK was harder than it actually is. So that's how it stands. Obviously, as you said, we will keep everyone updated. If there's any changes between now and the new dates that we're looking at, then obviously we'll continue to update all our websites and give everyone the more accurate information as we get closer. But no, thanks for that, Richard. Thanks to everyone that has joined us this morning. We've had some really big numbers join, so thank you for joining us. Hopefully we've been able to be clear and concise and give everyone the information that they needed. As Richard said, if there's any other questions, we are all available. Just contact the teams. We'll handle those as much as we can. If there's anything we haven't answered today, we will come back to you separately on that. And we'll look to get this recording out to everyone so they've got it for file a little bit later on today. But no, all good for me, Richard. Thanks everyone for joining us. And if we don't get to do this in a live format, I hope everyone can have a fantastic Christmas, and we'll be in touch again next week with some further updates. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Joe. Thanks everyone who's watching.